Hello, welcome back to the Down to the Wire podcast. We have returned again for another week of sporting goss. This week we're going to be talking about the Portimao Grand Prix, which is this coming weekend, and do a bit of a preview. Jack, how you doing?
I'm good. Not a lot has happened. There was no Formula 1 last weekend. And in terms of football, there wasn't a great deal going on.
Well, anything that happened was quiet relative to what happened the week preceding in terms of the Super League stuff.
Absolutely. That was like WWE excitement.
It was. Do you know what? That's a very good way of describing it. And in terms of how the...
it was just mania for a few days.
It felt quite surreal as well. It didn't feel like it was actually happening. So yeah. But cool. We're going to have a little bit of a look at the track, because we had Portimao last season. But obviously it's not one of the mainstays of the Formula 1 calendar usually, so we'll have a bit of discussion about that. What, things that could catch drivers out. Will some drivers benefit? No, I was reading, actually, I probably should have put this stat in the notes, but there were a lot of time-lapse being cancelled at Portimao last season. Let's see if I can get that up quickly.
Oh, were there?
There was a load. Right, here we go. In FP1 and FP2 last season, there were 125 lap times deleted.
Wow. That is an insane amount.
Yeah.
To be fair, it probably didn't matter too much. I don't think drivers would have just been... Well, I guess when it's free practice, you're in a sense, you're not really... Maybe? Yeah, you're not penalised for it in a way. So It's like, well, I'll just keep doing it and doing it. I mean...
Get away with what I get away with.
Exactly. I was watching a sort of simulation drive of Portimao by Romain Grosjean. He's recently put one up on YouTube. He was sort of going through it. And I know exactly the turn where I imagine the majority of those track limits being exceeded were. And it's turn number 5. I don't know if you can see it on the map I've put on our notes. But turn number 5, there's 2 DRS sections on this circuit. And the second DRS section... is over a hill. So you go uphill, you go back downhill, and it's pretty much a blind turn at the end of it. Yeah. And as it's such a tight turn that it's basically you're guessing as soon as you do the turn. So I think there's no wonder there were so many track limit excursions, shall we say, because it's just you can't see where you're going, and it is an insanely tight turn.
I mean, should we... well, I guess we'll have to see, how that affects. We've had a lot about track limits so far this season, where in Bahrain it was vague. Last race in Imola, they were perhaps a bit more strict and clear on the rules, and it seemed to go okay. I think the only real... there were a few lap times deleted, but the only one who really lost out because of it was Norris, and that was because his final lap in Q3 was deleted because of it.
But also, you've got to remember that with this circuit, you were saying like last year, a lot of lap times being deleted. But specifically because this isn't a modern track, the same can be said for Imola. I imagine there wasn't as many places for drivers to potentially exploit the rules, shall we say, to find that sort of extra edge. Because, I mean, on these old sort of non-modern circuits, it's not a smooth tarmac all the way off to a barrier which is cushioned with loads of fancy railings. It's gravel. It's just gravel and tyres. It's like you go off, you're not going to come back on for a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, let's carry on talking about the circuit then. So there's a lot of I believe in the world of Formula 1 they call them undulations.
Ooh.
So
nice
kind
technical.
of so it's, I think I'm right in saying that. Let me double check now.
No, it is that. It is that.
It's like banked turns, isn't it? It's like that sort of thing.
You notice the changes in velocity a lot more than you probably would on... Well, especially when you look at circuits like Abu Dhabi, where I don't...
Which is all flat.
Yeah, it's all flat. But apart from like turn 2, where it's like a downhill, but it's such a slow one that you don't really notice it. It's like... but when you got these old-timey ones, it's like you got banked turns, you got everything on these, so they're a lot more difficult for the drivers, especially as you sort of think with these sort of new breed of drivers coming through. They're not probably used to all of these different. I mean, of course, they'd have gone through rigorous amount of races, karting, Formula 3, Formula 2, and all that. I imagine they've been to a lot of circuits, so they're not inexperienced, but maybe to the level that some of the guys like Alonso and Vettel, who've driven San Marino before, and they've driven Portimao, I imagine, in the past. Or actually, I don't know, it might be its debut, but either way, they're used to these sort of maybe more brutal circuits in a sense, and more quickly to adapt.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely has an impact. The way the track kind of flows. I mean, in terms of car balance, particularly, if you're kind of because that was what a lot of drivers were complaining about in Bahrain, wasn't it? Is that there were certain corners where it was almost like the air was getting underneath the car and kind of making it very unstable.
Which that was mostly to do with the new regulations, and it's like quite early on in the season.
Possibly, but then Bahrain is quite it's quite open, isn't it? So it's a little bit less forgiving. And I guess when you have these kind of elevation changes, it adds a bit of spice, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
Potential that it could affect the Merc, which is maybe a little bit more unstable than it has been in the past. We'll wait and see. Like you said, given the fact that there's not a massive amount of runoff. And like at Imola, you have these kind of there was grass and stuff, but there were a lot of corners where it's just like curb, a good 2 or 3 meters of tarmac, and then the gravel. Whereas perhaps Portimao isn't quite as forgiving. So yeah, I guess we'll see what will happen there. We had a lot of exciting overtaking at Portimao last year. Particularly turn 1 and 2, I think, from what I remember. I remember Kimi Räikkönen.
Kimi Räikkönen.
I was about to say, was this the circuit where Kimi Räikkönen? Isn't this where Kimi Räikkönen was like, why is everyone going so slow?
Yeah, well, there was so much chaos on that first lap with certain people getting forget the term, but where the tyres smoke. I forget what the term is. They end up with flat spots. I can't remember what the term is.
Yeah.
There are loads of moments like that where it's like, everybody's braking really fast.
They lock the wheels up.
Lock-up, yes, they lock up their wheels. I can remember the term. But yeah, get lots of people locking at the tyres. They were just, it was chaos those first ones, and Raikkonen just seemed to be in the right place at the right time for every single situation. He was like, okay, great, I'll go here now. Okay, I'll go here now. There's just no one in front of him all the time. It was great. Yeah,
I mean, I'll be honest with you, I really liked Portimao last year. I'm quite glad that it's back. But yeah, I guess we'll see what happens. So, should we talk a little bit about tyres then?
Let's do that. They've not opted, Pirelli or the FIA have decided they're going to use the 3 hardest compounds. Now, I'm always disappointed when they do this.
Just for context, what ones have they used so far? Kind of in the middle, wasn't it?
They've been in the middle for the first 2 races.
Yeah.
So, for those who aren't fully aware, there are 5 different tyre compounds. I know on a race weekend you'll see, there's hard, medium, soft. They are hard, medium, soft of the 3, in a sense, because they only choose 3 each weekend. And there'll always be 3 which are next to each other. It's not like you pick the 2 hardest and the absolute softest.
Yeah.
So there'll always be the 3 next to each other.
Yeah, so as in the soft for one weekend might be, say, compound 2 as opposed to compound 3. Which is slightly harder. Yeah. But in this scenario, they've got compound 3, 4 and 5, 3 being soft, 5 being the hards.
So like for a circuit like Monza, for instance, they'll probably opt for the 3 softest tyres because there's very little turns, particularly fast ones where you're going to really be putting any pressure on the tyre. So for those, they'll be using compounds C3, C4, C5 because they are the 3 softest ones. But then on a circuit like Portimao, where there's a lot of fast bends, they're using compounds C1, C2, C3. So that C3 is being used in both, but in this situation it's the softest tyre, but in Monza it'll be the hardest tyre. So that's the way the compounds are going to be working. But yeah, they've opted for the 3 hardest. I'd be honest, regardless of the circuit, I always prefer when they choose softer tyres. Not because I like to see people's wheels blow up like Hamilton and Bottas's did in Silverstone last year, but more so because it means more pit stops. And I think the more pit stops you got, the more strategies go into play and the more chaos that unfolds. And I think that's always good for Formula 1.
Yeah, I mean, it's a bit of a balancing act, isn't it? I mean, it's still worth saying that, that when they are the harder compounds, but in the past we've had races where drivers, have been able to do a one-stop I don't think we're in that sort of. I don't think we're quite in that sort of territory. But at the same time, I agree with you. It creates a little less. I can't think of the word now. Yeah, it's a bit more straightforward, isn't it?
Yeah, there's less variance.
However, from a, is there an advantage to be sought in looking after your tyres a bit more, perhaps? For the hard compounds, can you make your tyres go longer?
But I think you could equally do that with soft tyres. In a sense, I don't think by having the harder tyres, people... I understand what you mean. Maybe they'll try and push it for the one stop. But, and you don't know, maybe they can do it. But when you've got softer tyres, in a sense, you can still have that element of holding on to your tyres for as long as possible. But at least it means it's harder to do so. Because I think Formula 1 is becoming more and more a one-stop, or close to two stops if the situation's right, sport. Which does... I'm not going to say spoil it for the spectator, but it does make it a touch less interesting. Especially last season when you just see in... because you think of Mercedes and Verstappen, basically, last year. It was like, okay, what are we going to do strategy-wise to cover him off, in a sense? Who's going to pit early? Who's going to pit late? And if you only have one of those scenarios for the entire weekend, it's like, Now, I know this season's a bit different because there's a lot more tension in it because they're both pretty much equal this year, but still you'd quite like to see them have that sort of dilemma changing throughout the race, because maybe the first time it's just maybe two Red Bulls on one Mercedes, and then later on in the race it's just a head to head, and it's like, who's going to jump onto the soft tyre earlier?
I get what you're saying. I mean, I think this season less so than other seasons though, because like you've just said, there's a bit more natural competition up the front, between the Red Bulls and the Mercedes. So I think it's perhaps less of an issue this season than it would be other seasons. To be honest with you, in terms of the tyre compounds, excuse me, I don't know, I guess we'll just have to wait and see. I mean, they must have some sort of reason for going on the harder compounds, as in... And I guess they've probably got in their minds, when I say they, I mean the FIA and the Formula 1 teams, they've probably got an idea of what is a suitable length of the softer compound, the medium compound, and then the harder compound. There's no point in having the softer compounds if your hard tyres only getting you, like, say, 20 laps, for example. As in, the hard tyres should be getting you through the majority of a race.
Yeah.
But yeah, hopefully, like I said, because we've got a bit more natural competition up the front, hopefully it won't have too much of an impact.
Yeah.
And I guess we'll and I guess from Formula 1's perspective, you'd rather them have when I say Formula 1, I mean the FIA. You'd rather them have slightly harder compounds and everyone finish the race than go on the softer compounds and
tyres
blowing up with a lap to go.
I don't know. I like the drama. I like the tension
but from the FIA's perspective, you never want. You never want like tyres to just blow up. That's never an ideal scenario. As much as it does create drama, it's never a good. Because I remember there was a whole thing before where like the FIA basically said to Pirelli, make an entertaining tyre. And this is going back a little bit now.
I remember that. Yeah, and you'd have tyres just sporadically burst for no reason.
Yeah, and it wouldn't just be like like when it happened at Silverstone last year, like you could see like where the tyre had worn away. And it just basically,
and they'd recommended the tyre to go a certain distance, and they'd gone beyond it, and it was like, well, this is going to happen.
You had the walls of the tyre, and then just the main chunk of the tyre in the middle, just kind of broken off. Like these tyres would like just shred into like a million pieces. And I understand that there's obviously the part of Formula 1 is the entertainment value, but there's also a part of me that thinks like this is Formula 1, it's the pinnacle of motorsport. Why would you make these incredibly fast, complicated, technical cars and then limit them by having kind of bang average tyres?
It's a good point.
So, it swings around about, I guess, but hopefully it won't impact it too much. We'll see what happens.
No. In terms of the weather, last weekend it was quite interesting because You had people starting on
A bit
intermediates,
of
people
everything.
starting on wets. Yeah, people were thinking it's going to get drier. Some people thought it was going to get wetter. This weekend, though, it's maybe a splash of rain in free practice 1 and 2, but apart from that, it's just looking really dry. Just a bit of, I don't want to say a disappointment, but
Well, it's just
it's always fun when you're
it's not
free.
there, isn't it?
Yeah, but
Always adds a little bit of spice when it's when it's a little bit wet.
absolutely. Right, should we move on to the drivers?
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, actually, just before we do that, what do you make of the circuit? In terms of,
I
know
love
you
it.
said you liked. Yeah, you said you liked it.
I think
Yeah.
it's really good. I think there are a lot. There's good variation. I think. Like you've got that massive straight. You've got corners 1, 2, and 3 lead to lots of interesting lines and overtakes and that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
You've got slow corners in 4. No, sorry, not 4. 5, 13, possibly 8 as well. There's lots of opportunities for overtaking. And I think that'll be something that'll be quite refreshing after Imola last week, because Imola's such a narrow circuit. Portimao, although it's one of the perhaps it's not exactly the newest of circuits. Although I think it has had updates in recent years, but there's good opportunities for overtaking. So hopefully,
Wow. Well, on the overtaking side of things, there's 2 DRS zones this weekend. Do you think that's going to increase the overtaking a little bit?
But
The second one's not particularly long, but
no, I'm just trying to see where it. Oh yeah, okay. Well, I mean, it'll make it interesting. Turns 13 and 14. If you're the chasing car and you're trying to get in DRS, you've got to have good drive out of those.
Absolutely. Well, yeah, you've got to basically your sort of straight, in a sense, really starts at turn 13, because you've got to bomb it through there and cling as much speed as you can, because it is just a full way through 14 and 15. It's just basically all the way, just carrying the speed all the way down onto that home straight.
Yeah.
Or even back straight, actually. I'm not sure where the pit lane is. Oh, it is not. No, it's the home straight.
Yeah.
But yeah. So looks. Yeah, I do think it's going to be a good circuit.
Could potentially see a few dive bombs as well up the inside of turn 1. Who knows? We'll wait and see.
Love dive bombs.
That would be nice. Yeah, that's my thoughts on the track. Do you have any other thoughts?
I do not.
Right, drivers. Let's move on to drivers. So yeah, I mean, first race Hamilton wins, followed by Vettel. Second race Vettel? Where did that come from? Pardon me.
Living in 2014.
I know. Hamilton followed by Verstappen, rather. Dear me, I don't know where that came from. And then Verstappen followed by Hamilton. Do we think it's going to be a 2-horse race again?
If I'm honest, I think there's got to be something nagging inside of Bottas to think, I have to get to the front this time. Because if I'm not, my seat is seriously in jeopardy. But as much as he may want to be there, I just think Hamilton and Verstappen,
Can't see it.
They're so much quicker than him. So much quicker.
Yeah,
so,
I mean,
if I'm honest, I do think it's going to be a 2-horse race again.
I do. I know we said this last race preview, but it would be nice to see Perez up there.
It would.
Because, he had the first race where he had that engine issue, didn't he? So he had to... Did he start from the pit lane, or was it just from the back?
From the back, I think. I'm pretty sure it's the back.
Either way, it wasn't ideal. And then last time he had a fantastic qualifying, and then just kind of... he just had a stinker of a race, didn't he? Absolute stinker.
Couldn't get anything going.
No, and then he did that thing under the yellows, didn't he? Where he kind of lost. He went off the track, and then retook the positions under yellows. You're like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
So yeah, a bit of a stinker for Perez. So
I do think it was partly the rain. I know certain drivers have a particularly good reputation for driving in the rain. I'm not saying Perez has a bad reputation for driving in the rain, but on this situation, it seemed he couldn't really deal with those changing circumstances very well. So perhaps that's all it was. And with this weekend being a bit of a dry one, hopefully it would be good. I mean, I don't care who it is. it would just be good to have somebody at the front with Verstappen and Hamilton, because then
let's not
extra bullet in the chamber.
Let's not bite off more than we can chew now. We've been screaming for Mercedes to have anyone to compete with them.
Yeah.
So let's just be thankful that Verstappen is up there, I guess. But no, in all seriousness, it would be nice to see more than just a 2-horse race.
In terms of the race, go on.
I mean, it's not looking particularly promising, given that Hamilton was kind of down in, was it 8th or 9th? I know he got the lap back because of the safety car, but he still managed to quite convincingly take second, which perhaps isn't really ideal for the other teams, because it's not a great scenario, that, really. But who knows? Perhaps someone can pull something out of the bag. They've had another couple of weeks testing and tinkering with their cars to try and eke out performance. Will this track favour other cars? As in, will it favour the McLarens, perhaps? Will Ferrari struggle a bit more now that, as in there's a lot more straight, fast flowing areas? Because so far we've had Bahrain, which is not exactly the straightest, and Imola, which certainly isn't the straightest, where perhaps Ferrari not clung on, obviously, but as in Ferrari have not perhaps lost out as much as they would have done on perhaps more open, straight circuits. Can McLaren kind of utilise their more powerful Merc engine? Will we really see how powerful this Honda engine is? Because, people have been saying that perhaps it's stronger than the Merc engine this time around. But I guess we'll see what happens. Hopefully, we'll have a bit of competition for Verstappen and Hamilton at the front. Who knows? It might even be Bottas, but
That's highly unlikely, though.
you said it, not me.
In terms of the race at the front, though, I mean, we saw Hamilton bottle it last time in terms of going off, and very luckily that there was a red flag to bring him back into relative contention. But do you think this race is going to be decided on a mistake, or are we going to get another absolute classic at the front like we saw in Bahrain?
Oh, I mean, it's difficult to tell, isn't it? It's in motorsport. Well, I say motorsport. Sport in general is all about margins. It could have been a very different race if that red flag hadn't have happened. It could have been a very different race if Verstappen had dropped it. He had that moment, didn't he, when the safety car had gone in. He was leading the pack, and he almost dropped it, but thankfully he was before the line. I guess you could argue that the fact that it's going to be dry means you're less likely to have those sort of errors. As in, let's be fair, what happened to Hamilton? If that's on a bone dry circuit, it doesn't happen, does it? And same with Verstappen, as in you generally, cars don't just lose the back end, especially when Verstappen and Hamilton are driving. But yeah, who knows? Could perhaps Bottas will do something maybe a little bit rash to try and get himself back in the hunt. I mean, ultimately, he's the driver who's got the most to prove, I think, out of both the Red Bulls and the Mercedes. I think you could look at Perez and go, well, he was horrendously unlucky in the first race in terms of where he ended up starting, and then had a cracking performance in the race. Okay, he struggled in the race last time around, but he qualified second, so clearly he's got race pace, or qualifying pace, I should say. Whereas, Bottas has kind of looked a little bit off, last time around. Okay, I know we discussed this already, but I know that he, was struggling to overtake the cars in front of him in the wet, so he didn't have the benefit of DRS. But, the way that Hamilton managed to just kind of dispatch of so many drivers so quickly, you kind of look at it and going, is that Bottas then? Because Hamilton seems to be doing okay. So yeah, I think Bottas is the one who's really got something to prove going into this weekend.
On Bottas, after his sort of attack on George Russell, that's how we phrased it, where he was like, oh no, I'm going to get lapped by the slowest car in the circuit whilst driving in the fastest car. I know what I'll do. I'll bin him onto the grass. But yeah, when he decided to do that, he actually damaged his power unit beyond repair. So he's had to put a new power unit in, which will cost Mercedes a pretty penny, 7 to 8 million, but you get 3 of them per year to use. So he's used one already after just 3 races. It's 22-23 race season. This could spell some trouble down the line for him.
It's not an ideal scenario, is it?
No.
I mean, I do always feel like, I'm sure I've said this before, and I guess it is a bit of a cliche, but I feel like in Formula 1 these sort of things balance out over the course of a season, as in like...
Do you have many crashes though, which...
Maybe not crashes, and not maybe not ones that kind of...
Oh, but you mean like you'll have a component failure?
Yes,
I see.
I guess there's not many that would perhaps deem the whole power unit, beyond repairs, and that is kind of a little bit unusual, I guess.
I guess that's what happens when you try and crash into someone.
Well, I mean, and I guess that's what kind of happens when you end up kind of in the midfield, isn't it? Isn't it? It's always a bit more of a...
It's a melee.
Yeah, it's a dogfight. It's a dogfight, as in it's, you've just got to get your elbows out. And let's be fair, that's not really something that Bottas does, is it? Getting his elbows out.
Absolutely not. Just puts his wheels in front of yours when you're going 50 mile per hour quicker. Well, in terms of Bottas, do you think he can... Is this like a revenge race? Is this some form of killer mentality that he's got, which says, no, I'm fed up of this whole idea that I'm not a great driver because Hamilton is dominating me so often? Do you think there's something in it which can, at some point, whether it's this race or another race, spark some sort of comeback? Or do you think he's just a shell of himself now, and there's nothing he can do to regain the confidence which he's clearly been showing that he's lost race on race so far?
I mean, the optimist in me says yes, but the realist in me says, well, we've had this kind of 3 seasons in a row now, and we're yet to really see Bottas properly get his elbows out in a scenario where he could be in a winning situation. I think it was quite damning on Bottas the last race, in all honesty. I
mean, that's got to be the pits.
Yes,
getting overtaken by Williams.
Well, there's no way that Mercedes car, regardless of what Hamilton did, because I do think there was an element to which Hamilton was outstanding. But regardless of what Hamilton did, that car is better than where Bottas was in that race. Like, a lot better.
Absolutely.
I don't think there's any way of disputing that. All of a sudden, you've got Red Bull up there. Verstappen's kind of muscled his way into the top 2, basically, isn't he? And Bottas just doesn't seem to... Like, basically, I guess what I'm saying is Verstappen and Hamilton, they're just different gravy. I can't see...
Different gravy.
Bottas... What did I say?
Yeah, that's good. I like that. Eddie Hearn.
Different gravy, yeah.
You, my girl, you are different gravy. Carry on.
Boyhead, you are absolutely different gravy. Yeah, they're just different gravy. As in, like, Bottas is. I don't think Bottas is a bad driver, but right now he's not showing what I think you need to show to warrant a seat in that Mercedes car. I don't think.
No.
And the thing that I guess is a bit not concerning, but the thing that I think is that Bottas hasn't really got that temperament of, like, okay, in the early days, like Lewis Hamilton, he'd make a mistake and then he'd have a bit of a tantrum. But nowadays, if Hamilton makes a mistake, he just gets his head down, and more often than not, he'll have a good recovery. More often than not. Whereas Bottas, like, he struggles, and then you just think, oh, come on, something's got to change, and then it just kind of keeps plodding on, and nothing really happens. So yeah, I think Bottas, he could be in a little bit of trouble, I think, in all honesty, if things don't turn around quickly.
Could this be a mid-season switch, or do
No.
you think Mercedes are too?
No, Mercedes won't switch mid-season. I don't think. Maybe at the end of the season, possibly, but not mid-season.
Fair enough.
I don't think they'd. I don't think they'd want the publicity and the scandal of such a move.
could come to it if Red Bull are running away with it a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest though. I feel like mid-season changes they've been more frequent in the last couple of years. I remember when Daniel Kvyat was promoted to Red Bull. I think it was after Vettel left. So it was Daniel Ricciardo and Kvyat racing in the Red Bull.
Mm-hmm.
And then partway through the season, Red Bull changed. They swapped Kvyat and Verstappen around, so Verstappen was moved into the Red Bull. And there was uproar at the fact that there'd been a mid-season driver change. Because it doesn't really happen that often. I know last year we had it with perhaps a few more times. We had Hulkenberg come back for a race or two, didn't we, because of
COVID.
Because drivers suffering with COVID, and Hamilton was replaced by Russell for a race. But generally, and the season before that, we had Gasly being swapped out with Albon, didn't we? But yeah, it doesn't happen that often, I don't think. In all honesty, I don't think Mercedes will want to change it. Unless, of course, Bottas starts finishing 20th every race. But
he's not far off.
He would do well to finish behind the Haas car, just saying. That would have to be a very strong
all he has to do is spin more times than Mazda spin. So it's
That's
a challenge.
Possible.
It's a challenge.
That is not possible. If you want a real challenge, forget winning the Drivers' Championship, is spinning more times than Mazda spin.
Moving down the pack, we mentioned Ferrari and McLaren in terms of race pace down the straights, seeing if the different engines can come into play a little bit more this weekend.
Yeah.
It is a particularly intriguing race. I mean, I've got the finishing positions for the first two races on screen for us. So far from the first two races, Norris has finished, of those four, so that is Norris, Leclerc, Sainz and Ricciardo, Norris has finished top every time, Leclerc has finished second out of those two every time, and Carlos Sainz and Danny Ricciardo have swapped over in the first two races. So it's an insanely tight duel between them at the moment. Who do you think is going to come out on top this weekend?
Well, I mean,
as a team, first and foremost.
I think as a team, McLaren, personally.
Okay.
I think, like I said, I think perhaps Ferrari might get... I don't think they're going to be miles off, but I think they may get found out a little bit. Mm-hmm. As in Imola sorry, I feel like Portimao is a bit more of a varied and demanding circuit than perhaps Imola is. And this doesn't just benefit Ferrari, it benefits all teams really, but as in there's not a lot of opportunity to overtake. So at Imola, basically, there's an element of, as long as you're with race pace and you don't make a mistake, you keep in position. Yeah. Apart from that, at the end of the DRS zone on the main straight, that was really the only overtaking opportunity. Mm-hmm. So I think, potentially McLaren will be the strongest out of the two teams. In terms of individual drivers,
what about them?
That's a tricky one, really, because I mean,
will Norris finish top of those four, do you think, this weekend?
I don't know. As in, Norris has surprised me, to be honest, because going into the season, I was banging on about Daniel Ricciardo, and Lando Norris has been the McLaren driver that's looked the better of the two at the moment.
Oh, 100%.
So, and I do think, I think right now, Lando Norris is the most informed driver in the slightly better car. I do think Carlos Sainz has got a bit more to give. I think he's kind of easing his way in a little bit. Same with Daniel Ricciardo, to be honest. I still think he's still trying to find his feet a little bit. Leclerc is looking... It's to be honest with you, I know it's a bit of a cop-out, but it is really tight to call. Really tight to call, because the Ferrari are probably much better than anyone would have expected.
From where they were last season to this season, anything is an improvement.
Oh, it's correct. But even so, as in
this is stellar stuff in terms of
and bearing in mind we're talking about the last season of a set of regulations, as in there'd be argument for Ferrari to just kind of not really make much effort with this car and just focus fully on next season. But do a Haas. But yeah, I think both teams are looking strong, to be fair. I think the McLaren slightly edge Ferrari, in all honesty, just based purely on the Merc engine versus the Ferrari engine. Right now, that is. But I don't know, what do you think? What are your thoughts on that little cluster of drivers?
I think Norris, outside of Verstappen, I think is the second best driver so far this season. I know Hamilton's been good, but he's got the car. I just think Norris has just been... I mean, I'm saying like Verstappen hasn't made a mistake. Hamilton's made a mistake, and he did come back from it, but Norris has just looked superb. He's not done.
Well, he's looked better
wrong.
than the rest, hasn't he?
Yeah, he's just looked phenomenal. So I do think Norris... I think the reason McLaren are going to finish ahead of Ferrari this season and this race is because of Norris. Because I think he's going to consistently just be too good for Leclerc and or Sainz to catch. And I think Daniel Ricciardo... I mean, you look... I know Daniel Ricciardo hasn't looked sensational in the McLaren. We did think he'd perhaps be a touch more competitive than he has been so far. But a 7th place and a 6th place ain't half bad. He's made Q3 both times. He's finished both of the races. He hasn't gotten into a crash or anything. He's just kept the car on the track.
Well, let's be fair, and if he'd got those positions in last season's Renault, you'd be looking and going, yeah, that's a solid result. I think it kind of shows you really where the McLaren is at, I guess, as a car. You look at that and go, oh, well, that's not very good, is it? Whereas actually, it's not that bad, considering he's this is only his 3rd race with the team. So, yeah, I think there's more to come from Danny Rick, to be honest. But we shall see, I guess.
We shall. Moving even further down, a team which I was hoping would be part of this Ferrari and McLaren cluster of cars competing for third.
Tussle.
Yeah, AlphaTauri. They seem like, as a team, better than Aston Martin, better than Alpine, better than the... Oh, I was going to say Racing Point, but that was Aston Martin, so ignore that bit. But yeah, they seem better than them, but at the same time, they show glimmers of pace, which can compete with the McLaren and the Ferrari, but then they just... both races so far, for both drivers, have been a disappointment. The first race, Bahrain, Tsunoda looks good in practice, Gasly looks good in practice. You're thinking, these guys could be on for something special. Something about this Honda power unit clearly is good. And then Tsunoda doesn't make it out of Q2, and Gasly loses the front wing on the first lap. But no, there's no fault of Gasly's there. Tsunoda, he's inexperienced. That's going to happen. Over time, he's going to become a phenomenal driver. Imola, Tsunoda crashes out in qualifying, so he starts right at the back of the grid. And Gasly, I don't know why Gasly starts on the wets when everybody else is on inters. And it's like left out far too long. I mean, you look at someone like Ocon, he pitted instantly onto the inters.
Yeah.
I mean, even though Gasly overtook him in the end, it's like you're in a car which is performing so much higher. So I'm hoping this weekend, no complexities in terms of weather. Hopefully they can go, let's have a normal race.
Result. Yeah.
Keep the car on the track. Don't crash out. Just finish qualifying. And you're already on a good platform to work off of. So I'm really hoping they can come out and really take the fight. Because, I mean, particularly for Gasly, I can't remember where he's started so far in the first 2 races, but he's been... I'm going to get it now. But first race in Bahrain, Gasly, who finished 17th, started 5th. Which is like, oh, what a disappointment. 5th to 17th. Second race in Imola, he starts 5th again. Finishes 7th. It's like, oh, you basically got the 5th best driver car combo on the grid, but you just cannot capitalise on the situation. So yeah, my hope is that AlphaTauri can finally do something. Because I mean, we see it so often with teams during the course of the season. They'll find those sort of time differences which they're behind in a sense. At some point Aston Martin are going to work it out. At some point Alpine will get a little bit better. And if they at some point overtake the performance of the AlphaTauris, they're going to rue this opportunity to get points and to finish, in great positions and, in a sense, bolster or give themselves a bit of leverage so that when those other cars catch up and potentially overtake in terms of performance, they might, you know what I mean, the barrier's too big for them to overcome. So you're just hoping they can get something on the board quickly, because it would be a shame if after this season they end up finishing as the 5th or 6th best in the constructors, and it's like, oh, you're gonna, that money can make a huge difference, particularly for a this isn't a first team, this is a second team for Red Bull, so that sort of money can make a big difference in them being consistently at the front, which is what they are at the moment. So I'm hoping they can do it better. What do you think their chances are this weekend?
I mean, I'd agree with what you said there. I think they'll be disappointed after the first 2 races, having looked so promising, and everyone was kind of talking about the insane rake on their car and how much of a impact it was having on their lap times, etc., etc. I mean, yeah, hopefully they, like you said, they're basically a feeder team for Red Bull. So I guess resources are always going to be limited to a certain extent. I feel like Bahrain and Imola are kind of missed opportunities for AlphaTauri, in all honesty, to get some solid points. Or more points than they have got. Like Sonoda, I think there's an element of inexperience in Formula 1. You could probably put down to those things. Gasly perhaps a little bit unlucky. And then poor strategy. So yeah, hopefully it'll turn around for them this weekend, I think.
We can only hope. I mean, I just had a quick thought then. Norris qualified 7th in Bahrain and 7th in Imola. And he's finished 4th and 3rd. You look at that and you think, wow, the chances. Like, the fact that he's started further back and finished further ahead, and the vice versa for AlphaTauri, they've got to be like, gosh, we could really be in that fight if we hadn't messed up those first 2 races.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. Missed opportunity, I think.
Mm-hmm, absolutely. In other news, Formula 1 related, we've mentioned this in the past about sprint races. Apparently, before it was agreed that they'd, in a sense, introduce sprint races. Now they have confirmed how they will be introduced. Have you read anything into the sprint races so far?
I haven't read anything into them, to be honest. I've seen them in Formula 2.
All right.
So, yeah, interesting concept.
Absolutely. It very much disrupts the flow of what a usual weekend is. I mean,
yeah.
Whereas the current format is Friday you'll have practice session 1, practice session 2, Saturday is practice session 3, followed by qualifying, and Sunday's a race. Nice and straightforward. Now it is Friday is practice session 1, as per usual, but then they'll have qualifying for the sprint race, which follows the same qualifying format which we currently know. Then on the Saturday they'll have the second practice session, followed by a sprint race, and on the Sunday they would have a race, the grid for which was determined by the sprint race final standings. So it should, in a sense, make the weekend more interesting, more attractive for fans. I mean, particularly when you think that most fans who attend a Grand Prix will only attend on the Sunday. Now it gives them more incentive, perhaps, to attend on a Friday, attend on a Saturday. So that could be good for the sport in general. Do you like the introduction of a sprint race, in a sense?
I'm a little bit torn, to be honest with you, because there's something, I don't know, perhaps I'm alone in thinking this, but there's something quite nice about the simplicity of how qualifying is currently. Particularly when you get to Q3, it's literally just a shootout.
Well, there is that shootout, but it's for the sprint qualifying.
Yeah.
Sorry, it almost diminishes the value a touch, in a sense. It's like that whole, it's do or die, you got to take it to the limit. Because it's like, hey lads, let's just finish. Because if we finish, we can rectify our wrongs during the sprint race. And at the end of the sprint race, that's our qualifying. Like, do you think having a sprint race sort of detracts from the value of the actual Grand Prix?
I don't know. I guess it'll depend in the variation in strategy, etc., etc. I mean, if you're just having basically the same race but just a shorter version, then yeah, I agree. And I don't know, as in, is there the potential that by having, like, there's a lot of sessions there. You've got practice, qualifying for a sprint race, which is, like normal qualifying. Practice 2, sprint race, normal race. There's a lot in there. Because, like, let's be fair, in practice 1 and 2 are, in terms of the sport, it's for the driver's benefit more than for the fan, right? As in, that's more for the teams to find out what the limits are, what strategy they want to run tests, etc., etc. Whereas, qualifying, okay, obviously it serves a purpose, but there is an entertainment value to it.
Well,
I don't know. It's
you mentioned that. You particularly with the drivers trying to get to grips with the track and how different tyres sort of react in different temperatures, in a sense, or how long you're using them for. They've changed the way tyres are actually allocated for the weekends.
Right.
So, whereas before I don't know what the exact numbers for the amount of tyres, particularly soft, medium, hard, you were given. But basically, you had some which you used for practice, some which you kept aside for qualifying, and some which you'd use just for the race. Very simple, nice and straightforward. Now, for practice session 1, you can use only 2 types of tyres. So you get a set of each. You can choose what those 2 are. Qualifying, you're given 5 sets of softs. I can sort of understand that as well. Practice session 2, you're only given 1 type of tyre. So in that situation, I think for practice session 2, they're saying, okay, you can decide what the tyre is, in a sense, so you can, maybe cater your practice session towards something in particular. But it sounds mostly it's just to work on your car, decide what the best configurations aerodynamically are. And then you have a sprint race where you can use 2 sets of tyres. But the thing is, different. Unlike a Grand Prix where you have to change your tyre at least once, the sprint race doesn't include that as a rule. So you can, in a sense, go onto a set of softs to start with, and then go onto another set of softs and just bang out the laps as fast as you can, which is interesting. And then for the race, you'll have whichever tyres you didn't use for practice session 2. As I said, you had 1 then. Those are the 2 which you use for the race, and plus any unused ones or used ones even for previous sessions. So it's a way more complicated system, where it sounds like you're a lot more limited as to what you can practice on and what you can race with.
I mean, as in they've tried to change qualifying, I think it was maybe 2 or 3 years ago now. And it was one of those ones that I think on paper you're like, oh yeah, that'll be good. But then in practice it was just chaos. You just couldn't keep up with what was going on. Now obviously sprint races have been tried in Formula 2. They use them all the time. I mean, I think the thing that's worth saying in Formula 2 is that I feel like there's an element you almost need the sprint races, because in Formula 2 all of the cars and the chassis are pretty much exactly the same. The only thing that the teams can change is the ECU, so how the car delivers power, etc. Which obviously makes a difference. But, it's not, you don't get the same variation amongst the grid as you do in Formula 1, because you've got the Merc engine, which is a lot more powerful than Alpine, but then you've got Red Bull, who've got a better aero package. So I think there's kind of a bit more natural variation in Formula 1. I think ultimately, for me, it comes down to, are you replacing qualifying because you don't think qualifying in its current format is effective enough, or are you replacing qualifying for entertainment value? Now, I think if it's the first one, I think they're wrong, because I think qualifying in terms of its format and its purpose works absolutely fine.
Agreed.
I guess you are probably going to get more viewers to a sprint race maybe than just normal qualifying.
I do think that's their main aim.
Yeah, but equally, I'll be honest with you, I've seen the sprint races before, and I kind of have an idea of how they work. But even when you were going through how the tyre compounds work, that's quite complex, really. So is there the danger that they're going to make the same mistake and just have such a complex system that people aren't really going to be able to follow what's going on? Mm-hmm. And don't get me wrong, Formula 2 is great, but Formula 1 is the main sport. What works in Formula 2, perhaps because you have the more... I guess maybe for Formula 1, you have the more casual viewer. People who aren't... they like Formula 1 as a sport, but they're not quite as interested in the lower categories. Do they look at that and go, oh, do you know what, that's just too complicated? And, like you said, does it detract from the main race? Perhaps a little bit. I honestly, I think it is going to come down to how it works out in practice, I guess.
Yeah, I guess it's trial and error. That's the only way you can work it out.
And they've selected. So it's 3, isn't it? They've gone for 3 circuits.
Yeah, they are. Brazil is possibly going to be
questionable.
One.
Yeah, potentially,
depending on COVID situation there, because it is awful at the moment. And whether, I know other circuits are interested, but they have confirmed that Silverstone and Monza, 2 of the classic circuits, are going to have it. So that'll be interesting.
Well, I mean, for Monza as well, I think Monza doing a sprint race is a great idea, because the past couple of seasons in qualifying has been a little bit of a joke, because everyone's just trying to get the toe off everyone else.
Yeah, so perhaps there it does work.
Exactly. So perhaps
well.
There, in that scenario, it does solve qualifying. Maybe. Is it? It'll be interesting to see what happens if it is successful in those 3 races. Do they go, right? We're going to have every single race is going to be a sprint race. Every single race weekend. Sorry, I should say, is going to be sprint race. Or do they go, right? Perhaps rather than having 3, we'll have like 6, for example, and then
completely randomly drawn, maybe.
Yeah, who knows? As in, personally, I think it would be a shame if they got rid of the normal qualifying system completely. Perhaps it's because a part of me doesn't particularly like change, but I do think there's something quite... I don't know, there's something I find really enjoyable about the simplicity of normal qualifying. Not necessarily in Q1 and Q2, I admit, but when you get to Q3 and it's just a shootout, and someone will be going around on a flying lap, and that's a fast time, and then it cuts to somebody else, and they've purpled the first sector, they've purpled the second sector. It's all
guts and glory, isn't it?
Yeah, it's all or nothing, which is quite... and it's almost like there's something, without wanting to sound overly dramatic, there's something quite pure about qualifying, because it's literally who can go the fastest around that circuit, driver and car. Whereas as soon as you add a race element into it, there's the potential for crashes and failures, etc., which obviously makes for entertaining racing, but it doesn't necessarily mean you get the fastest drivers at the front. So we shall see. But then, equally, I say you don't necessarily get the fastest drivers at the front. Then, on paper, that makes the normal race more interesting, because you've got faster drivers behind slower drivers, which may make overtaking more likely, blah, blah, blah. It's unknown. We'll just have to wait and see, I guess.
Yeah, I guess, because in qualifying, what that is a test of is individuals, on their own driving. It's like who's quickest. But that doesn't really have a huge bearing on the race pace of an individual. I mean, particularly, if qualifying worked in a sense of where everybody finished in the race is where they qualified, great. Because in a sense, that would mean that qualifying if that was a fair measure of how things are going to unfold in the race, it would work. You would never see overtakes. Nobody wants to see that, but quite clearly, qualifying isn't a perfect structure in a sense to say the fastest car's going to finish at the front, the slowest car's finish at the back. It's just a shootout in a sense to say who's got the guts on the day when they're not competing. But I mean, you look at a guy like Kimi Räikkönen, he isn't going to finish in Q1, but you see him in the race in Portimao last year, overtakes like close to 10 cars in the first lap. It's like the driver's quality to overtake isn't a factor in qualifying. So do you know what I mean? It's when you have these sprint races, perhaps you get a more fair and true qualifying, or grid rather, for the race, and it could come down to that. First place gets 3 points, second place gets 2 points, third gets 1. Do you like the idea of points, or do you think they're mostly arbitrary because they're just going to go to Red Bull and Mercedes?
I mean, perhaps this is me speaking from a few years. Well, I say a few years, many years of Mercedes dominance. But how much realistically does 3 points, 2 points, and 1 point make in a championship when a win gets you 25 points?
Yeah, I do get what you mean. To be fair, though, the end of a season can come down to it, maybe not in recent years because of Mercedes' dominance, but
I mean,
in the past,
I'm not against it. Let's put it that way. I think it makes sense to award, and I guess, you know, at the end of the day, because it isn't just qualifying. It's in itself a race. There is an element which they should earn something in regards to the championship. So I can understand it.
And finally, are you for or against sprint races?
Oh, that's a big question.
In this current format, are you for or against?
Do I have to say for or against, or can I?
Well, you can be impartial, but I think everybody would want to know: are you for or against? If it helps, I'm against. I think the product of Formula One is such that you have Q1, Q2, Q3, and a race. I don't like the idea of... I understand why, for commercial reasons, because I imagine you must get 4 to 5 times as many fans as you were going to get, just because of how many people will come on the Friday and the Saturday now. But I don't think Formula One needs it. If you're going to enhance the product, I think there's different ways you go about it.
Yeah, I to be honest with you, I'd agree. I mean, look, who knows? They could do it, and you could think, "Cool, that was brilliant." But I don't know. I just can't help but feel that this, like in Formula 2, I think it has a place because the cars are so similarly matched. I think if you don't have that kind of variable, there's the potential that it could end up being a bit samey.
And there's 22 teams. 11 teams, 22 drivers. So I imagine it's much more congested. So in a sense, a qualifying might not work as much there.
Yeah, well, and I'm not being funny, Jack. If you ever watch a Formula 2 race, literally, like, it's like you'll see a camera and it'll just be like car. There's no gap, as in like it's
everyone's as good as each other.
Yeah, then they're nose to tail for pretty much the whole race. I do feel like Formula 1, they're making the change because it is commercially motivated, and I feel like it's a little bit gimmicky, in all honesty. I may be proved wrong, but that's how I feel at the moment.
I can understand it in a sense, though, in terms of
of course,
they need to make money some way, and it is such an expensive sport. It's not like a sport like the NFL or our football, where it's like they make huge money, but you haven't. It's not.
Yeah.
I know there's big outlay on the players, but that's just come naturally in a sense. But they're not spending huge amounts on repairing players' legs, for instance.
No, that's true. That is true. Yeah. No, you can't argue with it. I mean, I guess, you know, it's easy for me to sit here as a fan and say, if they're making it for commercial reasons, I don't like it. But ultimately, they've got to make money somehow to keep the sport going, haven't they? So we'll see.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
we'll
absolutely.
see.
We mentioned Brazil being potentially on the cusp of being out or in because of the COVID situation. This is a casualty not out of COVID, but more due to financial difficulties. But the Canadian Grand Prix is no more. We are now in Turkey. Turkey's back. This season.
Not necessarily forever. We'll see what happens. But
for this season, though, Canada is out, Turkey is in.
Which is good, because Turkey was brilliant last year. Just saying.
And Canada is a bore of a circuit. It is such a boring one.
Yeah,
nothing happens. It's just straight to the top.
The only good thing about Canada is the Wall of Champions at the end.
Yeah. It really is a test of minerals.
And I do have a vivid memory of Hamilton. I think he was getting his first podium at Canada.
Oh, did he?
He was like a teenager, yeah, and it was all over the news. He was like, yeah.
Oh,
so I do remember.
Is Canada the same circuit that Jenson Button went from last to first, or was that Australia?
Oh, what, with McLaren? Or...
I think it was McLaren, yeah, because I'm pretty sure he clipped into Hamilton on the
possibly day. I don't know. It was a while ago now.
But yeah, okay. Yeah, I'm for it as well. I think anything that isn't Canada is a good circuit. So yeah, I'm for this. I like this change. In terms of other track changes for this year.
Just before we move on, I do like how I think because of COVID, there is now this element of they're not afraid perhaps to change circuits. I
No,
think for
because
a
they
while,
know they work. People like the change.
yeah,
don't they?
yeah, and I think perhaps for a little while there's been an element of, oh well, we'll keep doing the same ones because that's what we've always done. Whereas now there's an element of, well, actually, we went to Imola, Portimao, we went back to the Nürburgring Grand Prix circuit, going back to Turkey, and yeah, it adds a little bit of variation. It makes it interesting. I'm not saying you want variation and completely different calendars every season, but perhaps changing the odd one here and there, adding ones in, taking ones out, makes it exciting.
It does.
Or
Although
alternating, maybe.
I do still think that the best circuit, which was not introduced, but in last year's collection, was the Eiffel Grand Prix.
Yeah,
Grand Prix the fact that they still haven't brought that back and they're bringing back these other ones, I'm not 100% happy about that, but yeah, nice to see Turkey.
It'll do.
Yeah.
Well, that'll do, Pig, I should say.
That'll do, Turkey.
Very good, very good. Anyway, moving on to next season, though, sticking with track changes.
Miami is in.
Miami.
It's a 10-year deal.
It is, and it's around the Miami Dolphin Stadium. Is that correct?
That is. It's in the notes.
Oh, it is. Oh, gosh, yeah, sorry.
I was thinking, man, he's struggling with that. I can read it right there. Yeah, Miami Dolphins Hard Rock Stadium.
I didn't even read that. No, I saw an image of it a little while ago, and I was like, oh, that's the Dolphin Stadium.
Yeah. But yeah, it's an interesting circuit. An anti-clockwise, just for your reference when you're looking at it.
Okay.
I thought it was clockwise looking at it just naturally, but it is an anti-clockwise circuit. And to be fair, I do like the look of it. It looks like a fast circuit.
And I was just about to say, I'm just saying, you have got that. Well, firstly, the straight is mammoth.
Yeah, enormous.
And then the other side, you've got it's not a straight, but is huge.
Yeah, so there's going to be a lot of. I mean, it may just be that it's a small circuit in a sense, and those straights aren't as long as we think.
That's true.
But from the bird's eye view that they've sent, it does look like this is going to be a circuit with a lot of overtaking on it.
Mm.
I mean, this has got shades of the Bahrain outer, which we were looking at last year. Not in the sense of the actual structure, but in the sense of you've seen a lot of straights with small kinks in them, where guys like Bottas lost out to Russell last season, where it was like, you got to get on. If you can cling on with them to that kink, you're then the one in front. So you could see some really interesting stuff. So yeah.
Sorry, I'm just looking because that circuit looks very like another circuit. It kind of looks a little bit like Fuji Speedway. A little bit.
I'm unaware of that circuit.
Yeah, I don't know whether they've been there for Formula 1, to be honest. But yeah, I to be honest with you, of some of the new ones we've had, it looks pretty good, to be fair, and it's got a good bit of variation.
Oh, I'm sure that I forget his name.
Tilke.
Yeah, I'm sure Tilke can ruin it, but I'm hoping for the best.
I'm sure he can ruin it. Brutal.
Do we have Jeddah this year, or is Jeddah next year?
No, we've got Jeddah this year.
Okay, so depending on how he does on that, I don't know if he's doing this one, but I assume he is. We can see how much he can hash this, depending on how much he hashes Jeddah.
One thing I would say is that's a pretty cool backdrop for a Grand Prix circuit, though, an NFL stadium.
Is. Yeah. It's almost a flex. Just go, NFL stadium. Why not? Why not? Chuck that in the middle of our event.
Grand Prix circuit. Yeah, that is it's rather impressive. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens. I mean, everyone likes a new circuit. Makes it a bit as we were just saying, really, variation in circuit is always a good thing. Makes it a bit
10 years as well. So 10 years of this.
That's a long time, isn't it? It's like to commit to a Grand Prix circuit that could be rubbish.
Well, we've had Abu Dhabi for a while.
On a slightly less pessimistic note, Hamilton. He is planning to race on.
Yeah, next year. I was surprised by this. I don't know if he said it today or yesterday, but he's come out and said he does plan to race in 2022. I mean, this has got a... I mean, I'm sure Mercedes are glad about this because it's Lewis Hamilton.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think you can ever be disappointed
entity.
I don't think you can ever be disappointed at a 7-time world champion saying, "Yeah, I want to carry on racing with you."
Yeah, outside of Ferrari, he's probably the most commercialised element of Formula One.
Yeah, definitely.
And he's a phenomenal driver. Some would argue still the best, even at his ripe old age of 36. Yeah.
God, is he 36?
He's 36. I checked it earlier. I thought he's 4 years off 40. That is nuts.
That's mental. Because, like, I remember when Lewis Hamilton started as, like, a teenager. Flipping heck. Wow.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
Yeah, so very old for a Formula 1 driver.
Very old. Did he say whether that was going to be with Merck, or did he just say, "I want to keep racing"?
I don't think 100% he said it was with Merck, but I don't think it was at all hinted to it wasn't going to be them.
No,
I think if anything, Merck may have even said this is cool.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the thing is, he probably wouldn't say, "I want to race with Merck," on the off chance that Merck, for some bizarre reason, said, "Yeah, actually, we don't want you," and then he'd look a little bit, But yeah.
But to be fair, I think even if they did do that, I think everyone would look at them as the fools.
Yes.
A guy wins 7 world championships, and everybody wants to see Hamilton versus Verstappen times 2.
Just look at, going cross-sport here, look at Tom Brady with the Buccaneers.
Yeah.
The Patriots moved on, and Tom Brady's gone and won a Super Bowl. So.
Well, yeah, you think of Patrick Mahomes as well. You think Verstappen is the Patrick Mahomes in a sense, and the Hamilton is the Brady, as you say. And it's like, sure, he could go at the end of this, like Brady went to the end of his time with the Patriots. He could have just retired. And at the end of this new set of regulations, you don't know what's going to happen next time. Mercedes could be rubbish. But he's sticking around to see what happens. And Brady stuck around and said, "I'll go to the Tampa Bay," and came back and won it. It's like, this could be good. What do you think, though? If he does stay at Mercedes, this is going to open a new can of worms. Because I think the assumption was next season, Russell and Bottas, or Russell and someone. Now, if Hamilton sticks around, there's only one more seat. If Mercedes are planning on keeping Bottas as the overlap between the Russell era and the Hamilton era, will they be like, "Oh, can't do that anymore"? Or will they say, "You know what? We don't want Bottas anymore," and we jump on Russell early?
I think they'll just go Hamilton-Russell, to be honest.
Do you think that's next year's lineup?
I think so, yeah. But assuming Bottas's form carries on as it has done. Just because I get what you're saying, is in having Bottas with Russell is perhaps a slightly smoother, because you're not going to have the chop and change. As in if it's Russell and Bottas, you assume that they can be there a bit longer. Whereas if you've got Hamilton and Russell, you're assuming that sooner rather than later Hamilton's going to retire, and then you're going to have to get another new driver in. But who would you rather have George Russell learning from, Lewis Hamilton or Valtteri Bottas? I think there's only one answer there from Mercedes' point of view.
On a slightly askew note, Verstappen's contract is up at the end of this year. Do you think there's a possibility that Merck also try and want to jump on him? Or do you think he's Red Bull through and through?
I think Verstappen will go wherever he thinks he can win. In all honesty, I think that's the nature of Formula One. Is in sometimes you've got to, and you look when Hamilton left McLaren, everyone said, "What on earth is he doing? He's left a team that's won countless number of races for a team that's won I think it was one at the time. They'd won one Formula One race, and he's moved, and Lewis Hamilton is now a 7-time Formula One world champion. So, Formula One is one of those sports where sometimes you just got to be absolutely ruthless. However, having said that, I think Red Bull will be in a position next season where they can compete. Yeah. So I don't see, I feel like it would be quite a big gamble for Verstappen to go to Mercedes, and I think it would be a big gamble for Mercedes to plump for Verstappen, as in that would immediately unsettle Lewis Hamilton.
That's if they keep Hamilton.
Well, yeah, but let's assume they will.
Yeah, but in a sense, I mean, I'm sort of thinking this like the sort of chess approach. But if they didn't keep Hamilton, Hamilton's not going to go to Red Bull because I know Red Bull maybe be interested, but their whole ethos is getting the next guy through in a way all the time. So I can't 100% see that happening there. And if he doesn't go there, he's never going to well, I can't see Leclerc or Sainz leaving anytime soon. So in a sense, Hamilton may just drop down to a properly low one, or even go out of this sport entirely and go into a different form of racing. I mean, I think he did hint it was Formula 1 he was going into, but in a sense, by losing him, I don't think it creates an immediate competition. Whilst if you get Verstappen, instantly you take competition away from the other teams, so instantly makes them less competitive, and in a sense, you move yourself up. You've manoeuvred yourself into a better position if you jump on the Verstappen train. But yeah, that's just my cynical viewpoint in terms of going, yeah, let's be brutal. Let's really kill off everybody.
Can't argue with that.
No.
Should we move on to our Formula 1 Jack Slade, Jack Freeman score chart thing?
Let's do that.
That really catchy title.
Yeah, we do need a catchy title for that.
Yeah, we need to think on that because I can't remember. I can't say that every week. Right, so far the scores are Jack Freeman on 8 points, Jack Slade on 4 points. So I'm lagging behind somewhat.
You were lagging behind before last race. Last race, you predicted Hamilton would win. I predicted Verstappen, and I gained my 5 points for that.
Fair.
We both predicted a Verstappen pole position, and we were both incorrect, as Hamilton got pole position. And then for the overtakes, this is where the big swing has occurred. You went for Yuki Tsunoda, who crashed out in qualifying, meaning he started dead last.
Oh, yeah.
So he gained 8 positions, whilst I went with Pierre Gasly, who decided to start from the front and decided to go to the back anyway. But did reclaim, but lost 2 positions. So I've lost 2 points there, you've gained 8. So the new standings going into this weekend are myself on 11, and you are on 12. One good weekend for you, eh?
Well, you say for me, for Yuki Tsunoda, really.
Yeah.
I guess we should do our predictions for this coming race, should we?
Let's do that.
Do you want to do yours first? Because on the notes, mine are blank, and I still haven't quite decided. So,
well, I'm Verstappen till I die this season, so I'm going for Verstappen to win the race, Verstappen to pole. Until something changes, I can't see anything else happening. And you know what, though? I'm sticking with Gasly. He's too good of a driver to consistently have these super unfortunate episodes where he ends up behind everyone by 20 seconds and having to reclaim it every time. So I'm really hoping this is the week where he qualifies 5th, 6th or 7th and gains about 3 or 4 and gets me the points I want. I'm
going to say winner Verstappen. Pole, I'm going to roll the dice and say Lando Norris.
Whoa!
Because
serious?
Because last race, I'll be honest with you, I'm putting this in for variation, because otherwise it's going to be you saying Verstappen, Gasly every week, and me going Hamilton, Tsunoda every week. And based on last week's qualifying,
things will change throughout the season, though.
If Norris hadn't have had his time deleted, he would have gone second.
He would have, to be fair.
So I don't think Norris is actually that bad a shout. And for number of overtakes, I'm going to say Lance Stroll.
Are you?
I am.
What's that based on?
Well, he kind of seems to be in that bottom of the pack.
I
Not
see.
bottom of the pack, but bottom
go
of
low,
the midfield.
so he can't go any worse. Yeah.
But he's like bottom of the midfield, so I feel like he's in a good position to kind of overtake. You know.
You 100%. The season's a long one. It could change who you think.
No. That's what I'm going with.
Fair.
Locked in.
Alrighty.
I feel like we need a sound effect here.
Like the X Factor. The votes are in. I'm saying that. That was more...
Weakest link, isn't it?
Yeah, weakest link, yeah. Or maybe we go to Pointless.
Look, on that note, that's the end of this week's podcast. So thank you all for listening. We will be back next week to discuss the race review. Obviously, we would have had the Grand Prix by then, so we'll be back to chat about that. If you're listening on YouTube, why not subscribe? We're uploading podcasts very regularly. We uploaded 2 last week.
That is what we did.
Discussing various topics in the world of sport. So if you subscribe, you get the notification for that. Same with Spotify. If you give us a follow, you can see all of the other podcasts that we've done over the past couple of weeks and months, actually, now. We are also on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Pocket Casts, Breaker, Apple Podcasts.
Lovely.
I think that's all of them. Pleasure as always, Jack. Thank you all for listening, and we shall be back with you next week.